Hello everyone, I'm David Vaucher and this is Return on Racing. Return on Racing is powered by Vaucher Analytics, which helps race teams and drivers drive efficiencies off track so they can fuel success on track. Return on Racing is also brought to you by the Motorsport Sponsorship Accelerator, the most cutting edge resource out there to learn how to find, maintain, and grow long term sponsorship relationships. If you want to find out more, please visit the Vaucher Analytics website at www.vaucheranalytics.com and use the navigation links at the top right hand of the screen. Okay, so it's now Monday afternoon, October 20th, and the SimRacing Expo 2025 has closed its doors. I want to use this opportunity to share my thoughts with you while they're fresh in my mind, but I want to go about it a little differently than some other creators out there. I don't want to share with you what I thought of a particular sim or how a particular direct drive wheelbase felt like. I really want to stay in the spirit of the Return on Racing podcast and share with you what my thoughts are on sim racing as it pertains to the business side and not really the consumer facing side. So, with that, let's just get right into it. Now, the SimRacing Expo 2025 was an absolutely fantastic experience from a personal point of view. There's always the fear with this type of event where you spend days surrounded by things you think you love that you'll feel a little bit numb and maybe doubt that passion a bit when it's over. Not even close. As soon as I walked into the Dortmund Messe, I was greeted by a Ligier LMP3 race car, and it was all upwards from there. More race cars, more sim racing wheels, more of everything that makes this world so fun. And it still wasn't enough for me. I couldn't imagine feeling bored, and if anything, I left even more certain than ever that sim racing and motorsport are two of the things that make me happiest. I know I wasn't alone because the second day I was there, which happened to be the first weekend day, the line to get through the door went back hundreds of feet, and you could just feel the energy and excitement waiting to be unleashed on the show floor. According to the official SimRacing Expo site, from 2023 to 2024, the number of exhibitors almost doubled, and I wouldn't be surprised if the attendance figure itself exceeded last year's 13,600. Nevertheless, while I had a great time, I was there by myself with the primary goal of putting together a first-hand view of where the industry is today and what that could mean for its future. Behind the intricate rigs and full grids of sim racers, what I saw was an industry with incredible momentum, but one still figuring out what it wants to become. The timing of this year's expo coincided with a flood of new racing sim announcements, and together they tell an interesting story. Assetto Corsa Rally was unveiled on Friday morning, a genuine surprise that instantly dominated conversation. With the WRC license now back with Nakon for a game set for release in 2027, and EA's recent titles leaving players cold, the Kunos brand name alone guarantees attention as it will be the only new big-name rally title on the market. Whether Assetto Corsa Rally ultimately displaces Richard Burns Rally, finally, after over 2 decades, or Dirt Rally 2.0 is secondary. Its very existence signals how broad and confident the sim racing ecosystem has become. After all, the WRC is on life support, and I say that as a fan, and video games are expensive to develop, and yet here's a new rally title. Another constant talking point on the show floor was Project Motor Racing, due in November. The demo booth never emptied, and in fact always had a long line in front of it, a reminder that there's still appetite for new experiences even in a crowded circuit racing sim market. Add in Le Mans Ultimate, Automobilista 2, Gran Turismo, and iRacing, and it's clear that simulation racing has never offered more ways to drive. But abundance brings its own limits. Racing simulations are already a niche within the broader gaming world, and the sector might just be nearing a saturation point. Every new title divides player attention and forces developers to chase ever smaller sub-communities. And to me, that's why the upcoming iRacing arcade project matters. I didn't hear much about it or see much about it on the show floor, but if it can bridge the gap between casual racers and full simulation purists, introducing accessible mechanics like tire wear, fuel strategy, and real circuits, it could be the first genuine on-ramp into the ecosystem. The goal now shouldn't be to fragment the audience further, it should be to grow the overall pie by making entry easier and progression clearer. The takeaway from this surge in software isn't that the market is overcrowded, it's that it needs structure. The next phase of growth won't come from another physics engine, it'll come from creating a pipeline that converts fans into racers and ultimately into participants in the broader motorsport economy, and more on that in just a few minutes. Moving from software to hardware now, from a consumer point of view, the SimRacing Expo is a phenomenal opportunity to get hands-on with the best the industry has to offer. One can easily sample things they could see themselves buying, as well as experiencing, if only for a moment, the setups of their dreams, and I had the pleasure of doing both. But from a business point of view, the variety of equipment on display in specific categories raised some alarm bells for me. How many pedal sets can the industry sustain? How many new direct drive wheelbases will find their way into the market? Can the sim racing industry count on the same people to keep buying racing wheels costing close to and sometimes exceeding €1,000? If not, how will it bring enough people in to provide an outlet for all these products that are so well made they could last for years? I know it's a shocking thought, but we could all probably just do with one sim racing wheel. The variety of products is coupled with limited applications for them, because every major brand now pushes for an ecosystem that they can lock people into. There aren't really any clear standards for interoperability, and this is a risk for the industry because if someone has to upgrade their entire setup to acquire a new wheel, that wheel purchase may wait or not happen at all. And I'll give you my personal anecdote. I sim race on Thrustmaster. I like Thrustmaster a lot, but it completely cuts me off of any other racing wheel purchases outside of the Thrustmaster ecosystem. If there was the equivalent of a USB connection to move from one component to another, that purchase would become much more likely. Assetto has made moves in this direction with their wheelbases and adapters, but they're a rare exception. Perhaps this is what sim racing will converge to over time, but in the meantime, this abundance of hardware points to a potential sea change in industry structure, because if there is not sufficient demand for all the supply, consolidation is on the horizon. And with that, I want to put forth the hypothesis that Fanatec was just the beginning for sim racing transactions. While I was at the expo, I couldn't shake the feeling that sim racing still sees itself as a cottage industry. To an extent, that perception is fair. Not only are sim racing titles themselves a small part of the electronic entertainment landscape, but also the community still relies greatly on individuals coming together to solve the problems that inevitably come up when both hardware and software remain fractured. Still, these are highly capable tech companies, I'm talking about here sim racing companies, producing professional level hardware, and the Fanatec acquisition by Corsair, surprising as it was when it was announced, is more likely over the long run to be the start of a trend rather than an outlier. Its financial and organizational issues aside, Fanatec, for years, was the face of sim racing, and it makes sense that a computer parts conglomerate such as Corsair would bolster its product catalog by swooping in to acquire it before sim racing took off even further. Since then, we've seen Cosworth be very active by signing agreements with iRacing, Next Level Racing, and SimLab. Who's to say Cosworth don't go all in by complementing their existing limited sim racing hardware offerings with a fully branded suite of products via full acquisition of Next Level Racing and SimLab? This is just a hypothesis, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, and there are other examples. For instance, I have no internal knowledge of Seibelt's plans, but this is one of a few real-world racing companies that had a presence at the SimRacing Expo. Would they be tempted to grow faster, or indeed, would one of their competitors want to get into sim racing as well by acquiring a sim racing company? For this to happen, there would have to be more industry involvement than just one company such as Seibelt. The tech and motorsports industries must presumably be keeping tabs on sim racing from afar because their absence at the SimRacing Expo was notable. So how long can tech and motorsports stay on the sidelines of sim racing? And I ask that question because of the roughly 80 or so exhibitors at the show, 2 stood out to me because they were suppliers to other industries, but made a strategic decision to adapt their core competencies to sim racing equipment as a complementary revenue stream in their existing portfolios, which included renewable energy equipment, among other sectors. Those niche cases aside, where were all the car brands, motorsport teams, and tech companies? Almost every booth had a sim racing rig, and every one of those rigs was running an NVIDIA graphics card, yet there was no NVIDIA booth. The heart of a sim racing rig is the PC. Yet, where were all the PC and PC accessory companies? The same can be said of car brands and motorsport teams and series. There were certainly race cars on display to get people into booths, but there are huge missed opportunities here. At the SimRacing Expo, motorsport teams have a chance to connect directly with the most passionate fans out there, and crucially, the most likely to spend large amounts of money on this passion. Why were they not there selling gear and building out their social followings? Why was no one talking at length about their real sim-to-track pipeline? At a time when many car brands are struggling, Porsche arguably being the most high profile in the motorsport community, this type of event is a perfect forum through which to activate the demographics that are most likely to evangelize their cars. Sparco was another major player that was absent, and this is a major motorsport company that happens to have quite a developed sim racing offering. Puma wasn't there either, but other much smaller racing glove manufacturers were, and they were at the expo bringing in new customers. I understand there is only so much space to rent, and perhaps there is even a desire by the sim racing community to stay insular. But if this greater involvement from the outside is inevitable, and I believe it is, it would be more beneficial for sim racing to start that outreach first and maintain some of that control. More importantly, this crossover would cut both ways, and hopefully alter some of the demographics of sim racing, because I noticed some troubling trends at this year's expo. Put bluntly, the demographics of sim racing, at least the sample size that I saw at the expo, do not represent the changing demographics of motorsport. What I noticed immediately while standing in line and then walking around was just how male-dominated this subculture is. Sure, there were a handful of women walking around, but it was such a small amount so as to be almost insignificant from an overall view. And that's not accounting for the fact some women may only have been there to support their partners. Though I will say, I'd love to be told otherwise or hear stories of how some such women came away interested in sim racing. F1 is not necessarily a proxy for all of motorsport, but there's a lot of good data there. And the 2025 F1 Global Fan Survey states that, quote, female respondents skew overall younger and are newer to the sport. 64% have followed F1 for 5 years or less, end quote. The survey report also shares that, quote, F1 fandom has reached 42% female, end quote. I just did not see this reflected during the conference, and crucially, I did not see this among the children and teenagers in attendance. Indeed, the SimRacing Expo's website features a data set indicating that in 2024, just under 17% of attendees were under 24 years of age. That age breakdown, I guess you could say, feels right or felt right for this year's event. And while no gender breakdown is provided, from what I saw, it might as well have been 100% male in that range. This is significant from two angles. First, bringing in more women sim racers would be bringing in more racers, full stop. And that would provide an important outlet for all of the sim racing equipment that is coming into the market. Because if the sim racing equipment offering is growing, the pie should probably grow as well. Second, if sim racing is to become an increasingly viable path to a racing career, and I believe it will, then not bringing women in early at the sim level is only going to put them at a further disadvantage when trying to become full-time drivers. Quite simply, they will be left behind by all the boys who started sim racing in their infancy, as many of the top drivers today did in karts when they were young. This goes against the conclusions of collected data, with the F1 fan survey stating, quote, 23% of surveyed fans say they follow F1 Academy, and among women, that rises to 42%, making it the second most followed series after Formula One itself. The all-female racing platform, is gaining momentum among newer audiences too, with 37% of Gen Z and 36% of newer respondents engaging, underscoring the demand for inclusive storytelling and representation on the grid, end quote. How the sim racing industry brings in young girls and women to align itself more closely with the demographics of motorsport overall is outside the scope of this piece, but to me, it will be one of the defining challenges of this next phase of sim racing's growth. So, what now that the SimRacing Expo 2025 is over? This year's SimRacing Expo proved SimRacing has passion, products, and momentum. What it still needs is connection to the broader motorsport world and to the people who will define its future. Will the SimRacing community fuel further growth by embracing the trends that are powering real-life motorsport? And if it does, will real-life motorsport finally begin to care a little bit more about sim racing? Well, I'm already counting down the days to SimRacing Expo 2026 to find out. And that brings this episode of Return on Racing to a close. As always, I want to thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me here today. And if you like these insights, I invite you to consider signing up for the Return on Racing newsletter. This newsletter is delivered directly to your inbox every Sunday, and the idea is to give you quick, actionable insights that you can apply directly and immediately to your motorsports operations. If you're interested in finding out more, please visit the front page of the Voce Analytics website, and I'll also post a link to sign up to the newsletter in the show notes for this episode. Thank you so much again for spending your time with me, and I look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of Return on Racing.